10,000 against 100, swords and shields clashing with rifles and grenades. What would happen if a single marine company, armed with the tools of modern warfare, were hurled back 2,000 years to face the most disciplined army of antiquity, the Roman legions? Imagine a vast sunlit plain, the air heavy with dust and heat. In the distance, the horns of Rome sound and drums thunder like the heartbeat of an empire. 10,000 legionaries march forward, shields glinting like walls of iron, their voices rising in a roar that shakes the earth. Across the field, only 100 marines stand firm, weapons raised, fingers curled tight around their triggers. This is not just a battle, it is time itself colliding. Discipline forged in steel meets firepower born from gunpowder, numbers against technology, past against future. And the only question left is this: if such a clash ever took place, who would survive to tell the tale? 1. The two forces. The US Marines represent one of the most elite fighting units in the modern world. 100 Marines on the field may not sound like much compared to an army of 10,000, but each man brings with him centuries of military evolution condensed into training, technology, and discipline. They are equipped primarily with M4 rifles, lightweight but deadly accurate weapons effective out to several hundred meters. A handful of them wield light machine guns capable of laying down suppressive fire, cutting through waves of enemies in seconds. Grenades give them explosive reach, shredding tight formations with terrifying effect. Some Marines carry night vision optics, infrared scopes, and radios, providing them with instantaneous communication and situational awareness that no pre-modern army could ever match. Their Kevlar helmets and body armor offer protection against shrapnel and blades, giving them a durability Romans cannot comprehend. The strengths of the Marines lie in these tools. They can coordinate flawlessly, even under chaos, shifting positions and tactics with a single radio call. They can kill from a distance, thinning enemy ranks long before the foe is close enough to strike back. They are trained to fight as individuals and as a cohesive unit, able to adapt on the fly. Yet their weaknesses are severe when placed against such overwhelming numbers. Ammunition is finite. Each Marine carries only so many magazines, and each machine gun has a limited number of belts. Once that supply dwindles, their unmatched firepower fades. Furthermore, 100 men cannot cover every angle at once. Against 10,000, fatigue becomes as dangerous as the enemy. If the battle stretches too long, even modern soldiers may find themselves overwhelmed. Across the plain, the Romans bring numbers that defy imagination. 10,000 legionaries march forward, shields locked, spears poised, voices thundering in unison. Each soldier carries the gladius, a short but deadly sword designed for stabbing in the crush of melee, and the pilum, a heavy throwing spear meant to disrupt enemy formations before close combat. Their massive scutum shields form an unbroken wall of wood and iron, transforming individual men into a unified war machine. When called upon, they can lock into the testudo formation, shields overhead and forward, creating a moving fortress nearly impervious to arrows and stones. Their discipline is legendary. Roman commanders could maneuver entire cohorts as if they were a single body, advancing relentlessly despite casualties. Supporting this tide are archers, skirmishers, and cavalry. Mounted riders attempt flanking charges, while auxiliary troops harass from the edges. Horns and war drums boom across the battlefield, keeping thousands in rhythm and morale high. The Romans' greatest weapon is not their swords or spears, but the psychological weight of their presence, a wall of men stretching across the horizon, advancing without pause. Few enemies in history stood their ground against such an overwhelming sight. Yet the Romans are vulnerable in ways they cannot see. Against bullets, shields are little more than decorations. Against grenades, tight formations become death traps. Their spears and arrows may reach dozens of yards, but Marines can kill from hundreds. Their discipline may carry them forward, but no human formation has ever faced automatic weapons before. Still, sheer numbers have their own logic. Even if thousands fall, thousands more press forward. Where technology brings precision, numbers bring inevitability. This is the paradox of the scenario. 100 Marines could slaughter their way through wave after wave, leaving a carpet of bodies in their wake. But with every magazine emptied, with every grenade thrown, the clock ticks closer to the moment the Romans close in. Once within striking distance, sheer weight of numbers coupled with discipline and brute endurance could engulf even the finest modern warriors. One side is the sharp edge of technology, honed for maximum lethality. The other is the grinding force of history's most relentless war machine. Victory in this clash will not come easily to either. It will depend not only on weapons and numbers, but on time, endurance, and the breaking point of human will. 2. The imaginary battlefield. It is noon on a vast Roman plain. The sun hangs high and merciless, scorching the earth below. The soil is dry and cracked, the air heavy with heat. Dust swirls in the wind, already stirred by the tremor of marching feet. There are no trees, no hills, no walls, only an endless open field. It is the perfect stage for a collision between eras, where the full might of ancient numbers will meet the lethal reach of modern weapons with nowhere to hide. From the east, the Romans appear in their thousands. Their shields gleam like waves of bronze, their armor flashing beneath the sunday. The ground shakes with each synchronized step, the air filled with the deep beat of war drums and the piercing blare of horns. The formation is flawless, tight ranks stretching farther than the eye can see, banners waving above a tide of steel. Their voices rise in a thunderous chant, echoing the power of an empire that once ruled the known world. They are not individuals now, but a living wall, a single entity advancing with unstoppable force. From the west, the Marines prepare their defense. A mere 100 men against a sea of thousands. Machine guns are set up, barrels angled toward the oncoming mass. Rifles are raised, grenades are checked, magazines tapped and counted. The men crouch low, eyes hard, communicating in short bursts over radio. Unlike the Romans, they are silent. No chants, no drums, no spectacle, only calm, controlled readiness. The eerie stillness of modern soldiers waiting to unleash firepower is more unsettling than any war cry. The sounds of the battlefield are already colliding. The Roman horns clash with the metallic clicks of rifles chambering rounds. The rumble of marching feet mixes with the faint crackle of radios. Horses snort and whinny at the edges of the Roman formation, their riders ready to sweep around the flanks. The heat thickens, the dust rises, and the plain becomes a suffocating stage where history itself seems to hold its breath. There are no reinforcements, no retreat. The rules are simple and brutal. Fight until only one side remains. For the Marines, survival depends on firepower and precision. For the Romans, survival depends on relentless pressure and endurance. Both armies know there is no turning back. When the first shot is fired, the past and the future will clash in a storm of blood, fire, and iron. 3. Phase 1, the first clash. The Roman army advanced across the plain like a living machine. 10,000 men moved in near-perfect unison, their sandals pounding the earth in thunderous rhythm. The sound of their march merged with the rolling beat of war drums, a low, steady roar that seemed to rise from the very ground itself. Above them, horns blared, their metallic calls slicing through the hot air. Dust rose in thick clouds beneath the weight of their steps, and in the shimmering heat the legion looked less like an army of men than a massive, unstoppable force of nature. Their shields were raised, glinting in the sunlight like a wall of bronze and iron. Spears jutted forward, rows upon rows of them bristling outward, ready to impale anything that stood in their way. Their chants rose in unison. "Roma! Roma!" A cry not of individuals but of a single body, a single will pressing forward. To stand against such a sight was to stand against the weight of an empire itself. Across the field, the Marines were silent. 100 men in desert camouflage crouched low behind hastily chosen positions. Their faces were streaked with sweat, their eyes fixed on the advancing wall of humanity. Rifles were checked and rechecked, magazines slammed into place with metallic clicks. Machine guns sat braced on tripods, their barrels already aimed, their gunners crouched low, waiting for the order. A few men clutched grenades, pulling pins halfway in preparation. Unlike the Romans, The Marines brought no spectacle, no thunderous chants. Their silence was colder, sharper, more unnerving. It was the silence of men who had trained to kill with precision, without drama, without hesitation. At 500 meters, the command was given. A single sharp word, clear and calm: fire. The stillness shattered. The rifles cracked in a rolling chorus, each shot echoing like a whip crack across the field. The heavier machine guns roared, their barrels spewing hundreds of rounds in seconds, cutting swathes into the Roman front lines. Grenades arced overhead, landing in tight clusters of men before detonating in blinding flashes and deafening concussions. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The front ranks of the Roman army collapsed as if scythed down by invisible blades. Shields splintered, bodies exploded into fragments of blood and bone, and within moments the earth was littered with the dead and dying. In the first 60 seconds of fire, hundreds of Romans fell. Entire sections of the line vanished in the maelstrom, torn apart before they could even raise a weapon. The air filled with screams, the acrid stench of gunpowder mixing with the metallic tang of blood. To an observer, it might have seemed the battle was already over, that no ancient force could withstand such devastation. But the Romans did not stop. Even as their comrades fell, the legion pressed forward. The dead were trampled underfoot, their bodies filling gaps in the shield wall as the living closed ranks. Horns sounded louder, commanders barking orders above the chaos. Their discipline, honed through centuries of conquest, held firm. They had never faced such carnage, but their training and culture demanded endurance. Slowly, step by step, the battered wall reformed and continued its march. For every gap torn open by bullets, 2 men filled it. For every scream of the dying, another war cry rose in defiance. Then the first counterstroke came. From the right flank, cavalry burst forth, Roman riders spurring their horses into a sweeping arc, aiming to strike at the Marines' exposed side. Dust boiled up behind them, the ground shaking under the charge. It was a classic maneuver, designed to turn the battle with one decisive blow. But this was no ancient battlefield. The Marines pivoted with ruthless efficiency, radios crackling short orders, machine guns and rifles swung toward the riders, and in an instant, the air filled with lead. Horses crumpled mid-gallop, their riders hurled through the air. Some were torn apart where they sat, bullets ripping through armor and flesh with equal ease. Dozens fell within seconds, the charge collapsing into chaos. Yet still, a few riders pressed on, driven by desperation and courage, forcing the Marines to divide their fire between the flank and the oncoming core of the Roman army. The battlefield had become a maelstrom. Dust and smoke choked the air, obscuring vision. Explosions sent bodies flying, shields and weapons clattering across the field. The cries of the dying mingled with the relentless rattle of gunfire. The Marines fought with precision, cutting down enemies by the hundreds, but the Romans would not break. Their advance slowed, but it never stopped. Each step forward brought them closer, and with each step the Marines felt the pressure grow heavier. In those opening minutes, the Marines had demonstrated the terrible power of modern warfare, but the Romans, though bleeding and burning, had shown something just as terrifying, a will that refused to bend. And as the distance between them shrank, both sides knew the true test of this battle had only just begun. Phase 2. The gap closes. The distance between the two armies shrinks rapidly. What was once 500 meters is now barely 200. The Marines fire in controlled bursts, their discipline honed from years of modern training. But their pace has slowed. The opening storm of bullets and grenades has cost them dearly in ammunition, and now every shot must be measured, deliberate, aimed for maximum effect. The crackle of rifles and the chattering roar of machine guns still echo across the plain, but the rhythm is tighter, more restrained. Across the field, the Roman response grows fiercer. Entire cohorts lock their shields together, forming the testudo. Rows of shields rise overhead, others interlock in front, creating a living fortress that trudges forward under a hail of bullets. The Marines fire punches through shields and bodies alike, dropping men in the ranks, but the gaps are closed as quickly as they open. The legion advances step by step, and for the first time, the Marines see a formation that does not collapse under modern fire. Then the Romans unleash their first counterattack. The front lines of the testudo hurl their pila, heavy spears designed to bend and pierce through shields. They arc through the air, a dark rain of iron. Most clatter harmlessly short, but some strike true, one embedding into the ground inches from a Marine's leg, another grazing a man's shoulder and spinning him backward. Moments later, the sky darkens with arrows. Archers at the rear loose their volleys, and a wave of shafts hisses downward, slamming into the ground around the Marines. A few find their mark. One Marine screams as an arrow buries itself in his thigh. Another drops to the ground, pierced through the arm. The psychological toll begins to mount. This is no longer a firing range. The Marines are bleeding, not just fighting. The morale variant takes hold. Some Marines glance up at the endless tide still pressing toward them, eyes wide at the sheer scale of the enemy. Panic flickers at the edges of their resolve. For every Roman that falls, 10 more seem to appear, chanting, shouting, filling the air with a roar that drowns out thought. But the Romans, too, feel the weight of fear. Those in the front ranks, watching comrades torn apart by weapons beyond comprehension, hesitate. Some falter mid-step, the horror of bullets ripping through armor leaving them momentarily frozen. A few even stumble back, colliding with the shields of the men behind them. Discipline drags them forward again, but the cracks are there, faint but real. At 100 meters, the battle tilts into its most dangerous phase. The Romans are close enough that their arrows begin to hit with greater accuracy, their pila thrown with greater force. The Marines respond with grenades, hurling their remaining explosives into dense clusters of men. The blasts tear apart dozens, flinging shields and bodies into the air, but each explosion buys only seconds before the gaps are filled again. Then comes the Roman cavalry, striking once more from the flanks. This time, they are supported by a surge of infantry pushing harder in the center. The Marines pivot, machine guns swiveling to rake the riders with fire, horses and men crashing into the dirt in waves. Yet the maneuver forces the Marines to thin their line, diverting firepower that should have been focused on the legion's core. The Romans seize every inch they can, advancing under cover of shields, spears bristling as they close the distance. The field is a nightmare now. Corpses carpet the earth, dust mixes with smoke, the air reeking of blood and gunpowder. Marines shout to one another over radios and gunfire, adjusting, shifting, fighting to keep their line intact. Each man knows his ammunition is running low. Each man feels the weight of thousands pressing ever closer. The once unthinkable possibility that the Romans might actually reach them now looms larger with every step. The clash is no longer just about bullets and shields. It is about endurance. It is about which side's will cracks first under the relentless pressure of time and blood. Phase 3, the turning point. The distance is gone, 50 meters, then 30. Now, at 20 paces, the Romans are close enough that the Marines can see the sweat on their brows, the rage in their eyes, the way their teeth clench as they drive forward through the storm of lead. The battlefield has become a cauldron, boiling with dust, smoke, fire, and the screams of the dying. The Marines fight with brutal efficiency, but their magazines are running dry. Men shout, "Reload!" over and over, hands working furiously to slam fresh clips into their rifles. Machine guns overheat and must be swapped or cooled. Grenades, once plentiful, are now precious. Each one is saved for the tightest knots of enemy troops, hurled with deadly precision before detonating in thunderclaps that rip holes into the Roman wall. Yet the Romans refuse to stop. For every gap torn open, fresh ranks pour in, their shields raised, their formation tightening. Arrows and spears rain down, one striking a Marine in the leg, another piercing through a shoulder. Blood spatters the dust, screams cut through the din. Still, the Romans surge forward, closing the last few meters with sheer momentum and force of will. Then comes the Marines' desperate gambit, the final counterattack variant. A command rings out, "Grenades now!" In a single unified motion, every Marine hurls what remains of their explosives. The sky erupts with fire. Dozens of blasts ripple across the front lines, lifting men from their feet, tearing shields and armor to fragments. The shockwave is deafening, rolling across the plain like thunder. For a moment, the Roman advance falters, bodies strewn in heaps, the survivors stunned by the devastation. The Marines pour on what fire they have left. Rifles bark in rapid succession. Pistols are drawn, knives unsheathed. They fight with every ounce of energy, knowing this is the climax, the moment where the battle will be decided. But the Romans endure. Out of the smoke they come, thousands still standing, driven by discipline and the sheer inevitability of numbers. They crash into the Marines' position, and the battle transforms instantly from ranged combat into savage hand-to-hand fighting. Rifles become clubs, bayonets stab forward, knives slash. The Romans thrust with their short swords, shields bashing into modern armor, fists and blades colliding with Kevlar. It is chaos. Men grapple in the dust, screams tearing from their throats as steel and flesh meet at arm's length. Gunshots ring out at point-blank range. Marines fall, some dragged down by 3-4 Romans at once. Romans die in droves, stabbed, shot, or blown apart at near-contact distance. The line dissolves into 100 small battles, each Marine surrounded, each Roman pushing to drive through the storm. In the chaos, a Roman commander is cut down, a bullet ripping through his chest. For a heartbeat, his men falter, their formation breaking. But just as quickly, another officer takes his place, rallying them with shouts and the blare of horns. The Romans surge again, trampling the fallen as they push deeper into the Marine position. By nightfall, both armies are shadows of what they were. The Marines have lost dozens, their survivors huddling into a shrinking circle around their wounded. They count their ammunition and realize only a handful of rounds remain. The Romans, though still thousands strong, are shaken. The field is littered with their dead, their morale strained by weapons they cannot comprehend. They circle the Marines warily, unwilling to charge immediately, but unwilling to retreat either. The battle has no clean resolution. The Marines, bloodied but unbroken, still hold their ground. The Romans, reduced but relentless, still press their numbers. Firepower has not conquered numbers. Numbers have not crushed firepower. The turning point has come and gone, leaving only uncertainty in its wake. The conclusion. When the dust settles, the field is nothing but ruin. Thousands of Roman dead carpet the plain, shields shattered, spears splintered, their bodies sprawled across the dry earth. Among them lie dozens of Marines, their rifles empty, their grenades spent, their blood soaking into the dirt alongside warriors who lived 2 millennia before them. What remains is not triumph, but exhaustion, a battle with no clean victor, only survivors clinging to life. If judged by casualties, the Marines dominate the day. In a matter of hours, they inflict destruction on a scale the Romans had never seen, cutting down entire cohorts before they ever reach striking distance. Their technology is overwhelming, their discipline unshaken in the opening stages. On open ground, with sufficient ammunition, there is little question. Modern firepower would devastate an ancient army. Yet victory is more than numbers. War is endurance, supply, morale. Ammunition runs out, adrenaline fades. 100 men, no matter how well armed, cannot fight forever against 10,000. Once the battle closes to blades and fists, the tide turns. The Romans' discipline and sheer numbers begin to tell. In those final desperate hours, every Marine is forced into brutal hand-to-hand combat, and no amount of training can completely offset the crushing weight of numbers. The truth, then, is conditional. Under most circumstances, ample ammunition, distance maintained, clear lines of fire, the Marines would stand as giants, rewriting history with devastating ease. But stretch the fight too long, strip away their ammunition, or let the Romans force them into close quarters, and the outcome begins to blur. In that scenario, the legionaries might eventually smother their enemies beneath the press of bodies, turning modern warriors into little more than exhausted men overwhelmed by a human tide. And that raises the deeper question. If 100 Marines can carve through 10,000 Romans but still risk defeat, what about 1,000 Marines? What if night vision goggles tilt the balance? Or if the battle unfolds in a narrow valley where the Romans cannot bring their full strength to bear? Would technology then crush the ancient world beyond doubt, or would Roman discipline still find a way to endure? There is no single answer, and perhaps that is why the question fascinates us. The clash between past and future, between raw numbers and modern firepower, forces us to consider what truly wins wars, tools, training, or the unbreakable will to fight. The only certainty is this: the Marines and the Romans, locked in such an impossible struggle, would write a story that neither time nor history could ever forget.